at harm. I am Supergirl.
Hey guys, just finished watching Supergirl, Season 4, Episode 7, The Fallen Angel. A really interesting episode, this one. It was really cool dealing with everything. There hasn't been too many filler episodes in this show, and it looks like maybe next week's episode might kind of be, but it still is an interesting episode. So I like where things are going with this, and we still didn't get anything with the Russian Supergirl, and that was the whole kind of red son red daughter type thing. That was the whole kind of cliffhanger from last season, and next episode is going to deal with Dreamer, and then we have the crossover, which I'm really, really, really excited for the crossover. That's really going to be super fun to see that. The trailers that I've been seeing online look really, really awesome. So we start off this episode with the Agents of Liberty. In the last episode, they had taken James and stuff, and they want him to blow up a statue. And we know from the trailer that it's obviously the Statue of Liberty type thing. That's what it looked like in the trailer, but it's Chira Island, something like that. It's like a alien version of Statue of Liberty for the aliens to come into National City, and I kind of like that. So I think that's really cool, like that kind of setup that they had there. We find Lena she ends up finding a human for the test that she's been doing when she was testing on those hearts. She ended up making a heart that was not able to kind of work on and stuff. And she goes through all these tests and stuff, and she doesn't even she tells him a different name, never tells him she's a Luthor type thing. And she goes through all this different stuff, and I kind of like that kind of storyline at the end of the episode. They're all dead and stuff, and even James comes in to console her afterward, or to just kind of to catch up with her type thing after the day he's had. He's still feeling good out of that, whereas he had such interesting kind of like things that happened to him in this episode, and at the end of the episode he comes off kind of like unfazed type thing, just because he's done things like that. He's been through some stuff like that as a journalist and stuff, and with Superman he's probably been through a lot of things like that, so kind of it changes him, whereas it doesn't affect him as much. Whereas what Lena did, it's kind of the same thing, but not really as much as as James has been through this episode. Yet she was kind of distraught through it. So I kind of like the playing with that, and because she's a Luthor, right? She doesn't tell James what she did and what's going on. And I like she didn't say that, and hopefully after a while maybe she starts to go through a couple of patients an episode type thing, and we get to like 5 or 6 type thing, and then she kind of that weight kind of ends up maybe at one point she starts to cure something, but nothing big like cancer, something minute, maybe she finds a way to cure something, something little, but not big enough for her to feel like she's, not big enough for her to feel like she's accomplished something, right? But big enough for maybe James to come in and say, hey, yeah, you've done this. It's the first step. You've already cured this, right? And I think that's going to be interesting to see as to kind of where things go with that. Or does she spend the rest of this season, trying, and all of a sudden she gets to 10, 20 people, and, and it's like, oh, crap, at what point does she stop? Because, she's killing more people than she's helping, you know what I mean? I think that's really going to be interesting, and not all of them are going to be, she's not going to have the time to find everyone like Adam in this episode, who was, desperately needed this calling, right, to make himself feel better, right, to make his life worthwhile. Not everyone is cut out to go into the military. Not everyone is cut out, to be a firefighter, or all the things that he listed in this episode. So I think that's really going to be interesting to see as to kind of how far she goes there. And as she starts, she does it with one, she was really deeply emotionally connected with this person. She was having trouble with that, right? She didn't want to connect too much with him, calling him the number, and then eventually calling him his name. And, I think it's going to be cool to see how she starts to be cold with different patients, and shows up and, not even finding anything out of them, and she starts to be able to just have them kind of a revolving door of just new people, right? I think that's really going to be cool to see that. Maybe she kind of, and without her knowing, she ends up kind of, her Luthor side kind of takes over, like she says in this episode. I think that could be really cool to see that going on throughout this, the rest of this season as a backup storyline. I think it could be really fun to play with that. So it's going to be cool to see as to kind of where things go with that, and see how things kind of turn out, especially if she, doesn't end up creating superpowers, or, I'd like to see her just deal with that for the rest of this season, and then the whole idea of her, creating superpowers, which could also create, super soldiers and stuff, the whole Captain America and the Hulk thing with Bruce Banner. He doesn't want General Ross to get a hold of him is because he doesn't want the military to have Hulks, right? So I think that could also come into play, but I wouldn't say play with that just yet. I'd put that off for another season, and I'd just play with Lillian, trying to cure stuff and trying to do stuff, and she's not trying to give people superpowers, she's trying to cure cancer, right? So I think that could be the cool thing, and just playing with her morality with that, and her Luthor side taking over as she starts to kind of have a revolving door of people coming in to get tested and get part of her experiments, and she's like, oh, next, right? I think building up to that could be really cool as a storyline, and then seeing her having that as a backup storyline is a small enough storyline that I think would really work, and that could really work as instead of filler episodes throughout there. I think it could be cool. Then we also have the Dreamer stuff coming up. So we find out that Supergirl gets blamed by Agent Liberty in this episode for all the aliens coming into town, and really pretty much she is, right? Supergirl came out, and then all the aliens were kind of free, right, type thing. Which would also be interesting to get Superman's opinion on this. What is Clark Kent's opinion on it? I think it's really going to be cool to see as to how does he see things like that, especially since he lived on Earth a lot longer before, and was Superman a lot longer before any aliens came around. I mean, there probably was a couple of aliens here and there, right? He probably fought a lot of some Fort Ross escapees type thing for the first, 10 years of Supergirl being on, Kara being on Earth before she even became Supergirl, right? Someone had to be dealing with that, and it was Superman, right? Dealing with everything. So I think that could be cool, diving deep into that. You see James is kind of freed by one of the Agent Liberties, Tom, the guy who brought him there at the beginning. So he's freed by him. But then that guy ends up getting used against him to kind of blackmail. They kind of you do this video for us, right? So that we can and we won't kill Tom type of thing. So his humanity kind of ends up kind of coming back to bite him, right? So we see Supergirl ends up later on suspecting that Manchester was the one who killed some of the aliens, and obviously we know he did. And later on he even shows it and shows it to John Jones and stuff. We find that Manchester ends up delivering Supergirl to the Agents of Liberties and stuff so that he can meet the big Agent Liberty, but he doesn't end up actually meeting him until the end of the episode. He meets a fake and he realizes it's a fake, and then he lets Supergirl out. And Supergirl, she's in this kind of like statue and stuff that James is supposed to explode, and she's climbing up, and I couldn't help think that what a Wonder Woman moment, right, when she was climbing up, just like when Gal Gadot did at the beginning of her movie, which is on Themyscira trying to get her equipment, right? She climbs up the wall, and I think that was really cool, seeing that moment. Obviously that was a homage to that, I guess. And in the trailer for next episode, we see the whole Dreamer stuff, but we're gonna get to that in a little bit. So this Manchester, at the end of the episode, he ends up giving John Jones, I guess, all of his pain. He ends up sending him with some sort of device. He ends up giving him all of his empathy and all of his pain he's gone through. And that's when John Jones shows up at Supergirl's doorstep, at Kara's place, and kind of gives her all the it's like, yes, he did kill him and all that stuff. So I think that's really going to be cool to see as to how does this affect John? How does this affect things, things going on? I think that's really going to be cool to see as to where things kind of go with that. Is he going to be emotionally wrecked with this? Is this going to change his thing? Is he going to come back into part of the a part of the, maybe not return to the DEO, but they did set up a while back, especially when Manchester and him were kind of setting up to working together, which we still haven't gotten at this point. And then now we're not going to get it because they were setting up John Jones as a private detective, and I think that could be really cool. Maybe he sets himself up as a private detective for some aliens, right? He starts doing things and doing stuff for aliens and stuff and helping them out. And if he still needs to have, is he still getting paid by the DEO? I doubt it. I doubt that General, what was his name? General Haley, or Colonel Haley, would be, still funding John Jones if he's not, and because she voted against him, but she wouldn't let that funding let him get paid for her not being there, right? That wouldn't make sense. So I think that's really going to be cool to see. How is he getting by? What is he doing to live? I'm assuming he needs to eat, right? John Jones, we see him eating all the time, right? So he probably has to eat. He has to pay his rent at his apartment. So how does he doing that when he's not working at the DEO? I doubt that he's been doing that. And I don't think the DEO even the DEO, it's not like it's a super expensive, it's a super high-paying job. He wasn't getting a couple $100,000 a year or anything like that, because he'd be living in better than just an apartment, right? So I think it's going to be interesting to see as to kind of where things go with that. I mean, it must have been a decent-paying job, but his bills probably are at a little bit more expensive than what what he was at. So I think it's going to be cool to see as to how things kind of play with that. How is it things are going to go, and if he starts just doing some work, some PI work, I think that could be cool, diving into that, to the comic book version of the character, where he's classically a detective and stuff, and I think that's really going to be cool to kind of dive into that. And they had set that up a couple episodes ago, and it just went nowhere, because they were going to set that up as a team, them working together, right? He was going to hire him as a PI, but now that the relationship between Manchester Black, Supergirl, and John Jones is kind of completely gone, he's become a villain pretty much, or at least an anti-hero, and that's really not going to go anywhere. So I think it's going to be cool to see as to kind of how things move on with the John Jones detective storyline. So the trailer for next episode looks like it deals with Nina Null and her becoming Dreamer. She tells Supergirl she can dream the future and all that stuff, or at least she tells Kara, doesn't know it's Supergirl. So I think that's really going to be cool to see as to where things go with that. Or does she have a dream from the future where Supergirl reveals herself to her as Kara, Kara reveals herself as Supergirl? I think that could be really interesting. How far does her her dreams go? Does it go past, because I don't know anything about Dreamer. I know she's a character from like the 40s or something like that, really early on in the Legion of Superheroes. I think she was also part of the Legion of Substitute Superheroes, the ones who are not quite good enough for the Legion of Superheroes, which is a team based on the characters who are not good enough for the Justice League. So I think that's quite funny there. But it would be funny if they kind of mentioned that substitute heroes, right? I think that could be cool. Maybe Brainiac 5 and her could come up with that, right? I think it'd be fun to see that. So I think it's going to be cool to see that. It looks like kind of Brainiac goes inside of her head type thing, just like they did with Kara when Brainiac first showed up back in last season. I think that's really going to be cool to see as to kind of where things go with that. But I'd like to play with it. Can she dream the future? How far? Up to her life expectancy. So does she know when she's gonna, has she dreamed yet when she's gonna die? Can she control it? Is it just at random, just before all of a sudden she sees something and she's like boom, and that triggers a dream, and can she does she get a dream, only does she wait to fall asleep to get the dream? Does she she falls asleep and then, or she sees something happens and that changes something, and then she kind of slowly falls asleep a few minutes later and then kind of gets triggered. I think that's really going to be cool to kind of play with that, into how far she can look into that. I mean, is she going to be able to predict the crossover coming up? How far can she go from that? And like I said, do things trigger it? How things are going to go with that? I mean, it looks like there's going to be some Agent Liberty stuff dealing with the dreams and stuff, but I can see that happening with Ben Lockwood, always on TV. She sees that. She's always kind of writing about it. It's all around her at work too, Agent Liberty, so she probably would be dreaming about that. So I guess the crossover might not be something she dreams about because she has nothing to kind of trigger her, but I think that'll be cool to see, is if she needs a trigger or she doesn't need a trigger and something she could just all of a sudden have a dream and it's just something like, oh my god, this is gonna happen, there's nothing that triggered her, she just had a dream about it, right? I think that could really be cool to see as to how things go and how they're gonna show us the dreams, how much information. They're not gonna completely give us everything. It would just be too much. She'd be too much of a she'd be too much giving the answers for everything, right? She can just dream up the solution and dream up the problem, right? So I think that's really going to be cool to see as to how things go with that, and how she kind of learns to do this, and is she going to be able to learn to kind of maybe not have to be asleep to do this? Maybe she learns to meditate, right? I think that could be cool. And that also would be a cool thing to mix up with different powers, right? I would love to see Vibe, Cisco and her mixing their powers. That could be an interesting idea. If he vibes her while she's dreaming, what happens there? How can they see each other's stuff, right? I think that could be really interesting to see. Can the two of them mixing up their powers? If she sees things a bit unclear and he sees things a bit unclear, can they vibe things at the same time? If they have an item that she uses to to create a dream, right, to trigger a dream, and he's vibing it at the same time while vibing her, her dream type thing. I think could be an interesting idea. Could be something cool to play up. But I doubt with the way the crossover looks like we're going to get any of that. And that is one of the kind of disappointing things why I really wish that Supergirl was on the same Earth as Arrow and Flash, so that you could have characters like Vibe go back and forth. You could have characters like Nina Null go back and forth, right? I think it'd be really interesting to see that. I mean, imagine what Arrow would be able to do with Nina Null's powers, and she's able to kind of, dream the future, right? She goes over one episode and is like, hey, I dreamt this, here you go. And she goes over, right? She needs to tell him, right? And I think that could be really an interesting idea, is if it was, on the same Earth, you could have a character like Dreamer going back and forth, giving people like, oh, I dreamt this, and I dreamt that, and every time she's dreaming up, she meets everyone at one of the crossovers, and then kind of, she can go to everyone's place and go like this. But now that Titser's on this Earth, there's no real reason for Dreamer to go over, she doesn't know Oliver, she doesn't know anything. Why would Supergirl bring Dreamer over? So that's kind of one of the reasons why I really hope, I'd like to see in the future at some point to see Supergirl somehow have National City get picked up and put onto Earth 1 with Flash and Arrow type thing. So I think that could be really cool, because I'd love to see how kind of Cisco and her powers would kind of merge, so they could clear each other's. I think together they'd probably get a perfectly clear image, right? I think it'd be really cool and fun to see that. But yeah, so let me know what you think, guys, about this episode in the comments below. Where do you think things are going in the next episode, and how are you excited, because we only have one more episode before the crossover? So let me know what you think, guys, about this in the comments below. Where do you think things are going, and what do you think? How do you think things would work with Vibe and Dreamer's powers combined? I think it could be quite fun. So let me know what you think, guys, in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.
I'm Captain America, here to talk to you about one of the most valuable traits a soldier or student can have.
Subscribing.
Sometimes subscribing is the key to victory. Sometimes it leads to very little, and it seems like it's not worth it. And you wonder why you waited so long for something so disappointing. How many more of these?
You're still here.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, guys. Peace.
It's over.